We've seen it out in the field and we've seen it harvested. Now we're heading to Jonesboro, Arkansas to meet the folks at Riceland to learn where this rice is headed next. So Ken, we've traveled south out of Butler County, Missouri, southeast Missouri, down to Jonesboro, Arkansas, and we're here at Riceland. So we've watched the kernel of rice travel. The next stop off the farm is to you guys. So what happens next?
Yeah, right now we're in the middle of rice harvest. It is, I would say we're starting to peak. So the rice is coming in from the fields to our grain dryer location here in Jonesboro. So once we get the rice in and it's stored, then we will start processing it through our mills and getting it ready for shipment for our customers.
So how long does that drying process take typically?
It typically takes, 3 to 5 days, depending on the moisture.
Once it's time to be milled, what's that first step?
Well, when we bring the rice from the dryers to the mill, the first thing we're going to do is clean it. We're going to remove any impurities in the rice and try to get this down to a pure rough rice product. So when the rice first comes into the mill and we clean it, it's going to go through the shelling process where we're removing the rice hull. So it goes through a machine called a sheller or a patty husker that has 2 rubber rows that are spinning at a high rate of speed, and they come together and the rice goes between them and it removes the husk. So that's in the brown rice stage, okay? So after that it goes to another process called patty machines. The husking process is only about 95% efficient, so there's still some kernels in that stream that have the husk on them. So you have to remove the rough rice kernels from the brown rice. So you go through that process, and the ones that are not hulled go back to the shellers. Okay, then you got brown rice. Now it's got to get milled. So it goes through some machines called milling equipment. And that is 3 different stages of process where it's using friction and abrasive equipment, stones, to remove that bran layer off that rice. And then you go through a process called color sorting, where you have to remove defects in the kernels. Some of the kernels will have damaged spots on them, either through a bug bite in the field or through other types of damage. And that process also removes any seeds or any foreign material. So once you mill it.
Now is that done by machine too?
It is.
Okay. So there's not someone picking out each?
it's really one of the most complex machines in the mill. It's called a color sorter. And you've got all these kernels of rice going in front of cameras at a high rate of speed. And so it sees that one kernel that's got a little defect on it and uses the puff of air to shoot it out the stream.
Does the milling process change on the variety of rice?
Not really. For us, the big difference in milling is between long grain and medium grain.
So, in thinking of the life of the rice, from the time it leaves the farm, heads over to you, how long does it take before it's on the shelves for a consumer to buy?
Right. Think about it like this. The rice harvest occurs in about a 3-month period. So
depending upon where you are in the U.S.?
Yeah, pretty much though. It starts in the end of August and goes through the end of October. So we're bringing all this rice in a short period of time. Then we spend the rest of the year processing that rice throughout the year and putting it on our supply chain. But as rice comes in, it's dried down in 4, 5, 6 days, it needs to temper a little bit so it can, when it goes through the milling process, it yields better. So, but once it goes through the mill into our bins, get ready to ship, it's immediately shipped. We don't sit on a lot of product except in the rough form. Once we process it, mill it, it's going out the door. Yeah, it's going to customers.
Well, then we have literally seen the entire life cycle of rice, from the plant in the field to the harvest process and then to milling. Now it's time to talk about what happens next. But first, let's talk about Riceland. What does it mean to be a farmer-owned cooperative?
Farmer-owned cooperative means the farmers own our business, and that's a very
unique. You work for them.
We work for them. I've got a board of directors that consists of 24 farmers across our entire growing regions of Arkansas and Missouri. They represent the regions and the various growing areas that they're in locally, and so they have their own constituency. and we work for them. We report and interact with them on a very regular basis.
So when it comes to the rice that's coming here to your Jonesboro plants, where's it all coming from?
When you're on the Clark farm, you're up in some of the more northern part of what I would call our footprint. But really, we're going to receive rice anywhere from almost the Louisiana line down in southeast Arkansas, all the way up to that boot hill of Missouri. So there's rice that there's literally millions of acres of rice that is grown across that growing region.
You know, the history of Riceland, how has that evolved and grown into what it is today?
We were formed in 1921. We've got an interesting history. The farmers that were really our founding fathers, if you will, they had sold some rice to some merchants and mills down in New Orleans, Louisiana. And by the time they had shipped the rice down, had it processed and marketed, and they were expecting a check, they instead got a bill for the services.
Because of everything that took place in between.
Everything that took place in between. So as you're looking at this process, there's a lot of cost that goes into all this, and it's very complicated. So they decided, you know what? We're going to build our own processing facility and keep that value internally within our own company. They didn't, not one of them had enough money to go do that on their own, so they pulled their resources together cooperatively. And that's the heart of what they started in 1921. It's still the heart of what we do today.
Whether it's in Jonesboro or your main office there in southern Arkansas, but what happens to the rice next?
It's going to be marketed domestically or internationally. Over the last few years, we've probably exported to over 70 countries around the world. But when you're thinking about domestically, that can take any form, a lot of different forms. You're going to see it on the retail shelves in packages such as these.
Stuff we've seen in our local grocery store.
Absolutely. That's where you're going to see our branded product right there in the grocery store. Or you may find it when you're out at your restaurant. That's going to be our food service business. We have food service sales all across the United States and even other countries. But then it may show up in places you might not think about Riceland Foods, that you're going to see it in other brands such as Kellogg's or Post with your cereal accounts, or maybe on the weekends if you're so inclined. Anheuser-Busch is a customer of ours, so if you may even find it on for some of the celebrations.
Yes,
start your morning with cereal and maybe end your day with a good celebration beverage.
You think of traditional forms of rice, but rice is in a lot of other things.
It is. We have strong ingredient accounts that the list that I couldn't even begin to start the list of ingredient accounts that we handle on a daily basis.
And that's what's so fascinating is the diversity, and we're here in Arkansas, but the diversity in Missouri and agriculture, or Missouri and Arkansas's agriculture. You think that most people up in northern Kansas City or St. Louis don't know that rice production takes place in southeast Missouri, and so the footprint, to think that what they're growing on their farm can be traveling around the world is pretty fascinating.
It is, and Missouri is one of the fastest growing rice growing regions in the country. It is, and it's got a great growing environment. They've got ample water resources. Rice takes a lot of water, which I know y'all saw yesterday. Might even got your foot wet. A little bit. So we're certainly we're blessed to be in the best area in the country for where rice can be grown.
Well, if you think of the history of rice going into 2020 and then, the next decade or more, how has it changed and how do you see the market changing in the future?
Well, where I'll start with that is the technology from our farmers. The equipment that you saw yesterday on that farm I grew up on a farm in southeast Arkansas, and looked a little different. It looked a lot different. It looks, when you get inside of one of those machines today, you might as well be getting inside of the space shuttle. And the amount of volume that they can cut on a daily basis is different now than it was then. So when you're in a spot like we are receiving that rice, think about that volume, that spigot, that harvest spigot, if you want to call it, has been turned on to full speed. And we're busy as we can be on a daily basis right now trying to get all of that rice in and get it stored and get it safe and get it dry so that when we are ready to market it throughout the rest of the year, we're able to do so in a positive manner.